So I'm Jake. I did my speech on psychedelics, anxiety, and depression, and this is my speech. All right. See, there we go. Okay. Hear me good? It seems more and more common for people to have depression and anxiety in today's world. For instance, I grew up with a friend named Sarah. She struggled with depression for as long as she can remember. Her doctor prescribed her multiple different antidepressants throughout high school, but they didn't help her in the long run. And to this day, she still struggles with daily activities due to her mental health. Doctors often prescribe antidepressants to try and fix problems like depression and anxiety, but these can take 4 to 6 weeks to even take effect. Not to mention, they only work as long as you take them consistently. What if there was a way to have had 1 or 2 treatments that could have had a long-term effect on our life with no recurring treatment? Psychedelic therapy shows promise to be just this, as it can aid in changing the perception and increasing the quality of life in those with depression and anxiety. According to a study in 2014 investigating whether LSD-assisted psychotherapy could ease anxiety associated with life-threatening illness, there were reports that within 12 months, 77.8% of participants who took part in this study reported reduced anxiety, and 66.7% showed increased quality of life following their study participation. Today, we're going to learn about psychedelics. We will be discussing what they are, their history, and medical studies. First, let's discuss what psychedelics are. According to Elaine Wu, the term psychedelic has Greek roots meaning mind manifesting. This term was coined by Humphrey Osmond. Basically, psychedelic drugs are substances which seem to affect consciousness and have the potential to change the way an individual perceives the world at large. But how do they really affect the brain? According to Robert Carhart Harris, all classic hallucinogens stimulate a particular serotonin receptor, the serotonin 2A receptor. By stimulating this receptor, psychedelic drugs have an effect on an individual's perception, and some say it makes changes in the minds that might originally be impossible, possible. The basic idea behind psychedelic therapy is using this potential to create change in order to help those who might have been through a traumatic experience or have been terminally diagnosed to better cope with their situation. The typical model for psychedelic therapy is for the drug to be administered to the patient in a controlled environment. A trained therapist tells the patient that they should, what they should expect and reminds them that they are in a safe space. The therapist then administers the drug, tells the patient to lie down, put on an eye shade, and plays music. This experience is often reported as very powerful, and according to Tanya Lewis from scientificamerican.com, says that after one study was conducted, more than 85% of the subjects reported that their psilocybin trip was one of the 5 most meaningful and spiritually significant experiences of their lives. Now that we have a basic understanding of what psychedelics are, let's explore a very brief history of their use. Psychedelics have a very long history. However, due to a few reasons, they're only recently being looked into for clinical use. According to Dr. Sessa, psychedelic plants have been used by non-Western cultures as sacramental tools for thousands of years. They've been used by many cultures for various different religious practices and traditions. Just one of these is the ayahuasca ceremony done in countries like Costa Rica and Brazil. But according to Dr. Sessa, the clinical potential for LSD became apparent around the 1950s with good success in clinical trials using the drug. During this time, over 1,000 papers were written on the subject, and the results were overwhelmingly beneficial. However, LSD leaked from the scientific world, and the counterculture took it up as a recreational drug. This created backlash and resulted in President Nixon starting the war on drugs. The rest of the world followed suit in banning psychedelic drugs, and the result was that the majority of the medical research ground to a halt. And as a result, we've lost decades of potential research. Since the end of the 1960s, the whole idea of psychedelics in medicine was almost completely forgotten. And all of the work that was put in during the 1950s and 60s is as if it never happened. According to Dr. Sessa, after almost 40 years of several new psychedelic drug research several new psychedelic drug research projects have started off. Now that we've discussed a brief history of their use, let's look at some studies that show their medical potential. There are many studies that show promising results with various forms of psychedelic therapy. For example, Tanya Lewis reports that Matthew Johnson led a study in 2014 to see if psilocybin could help people quit smoking. The study followed a classic model for psychedelic therapy, which is what I touched on earlier, where the participant lies on a couch and wears eye shades and listens to music. The study found that after 6 months, 80% of the smokers in the study had abstained from cigarettes for at least a week. Compared to other smoking cessation therapies, whose percentages are usually less than 35%. Albert Garcia Romeo from NCBI writes on another study with the focus of treatment-resistant OCD. The results of this one were also very positive, with 67% of participants showing complete remission in 1 week, and 42% of participants at 3 months after high-dose psilocybin administration. Hundreds of studies just like these have taken place, and the statistics don't lie. It appears as though psychedelic therapy has a huge potential to help those with depression and anxiety. Today, we learned about psychedelics. We talked about what they are, briefly touched on their history, and discussed medical studies. It's impressive to think that within only 12 months after participation in psychedelic therapy, 77.8% of participants report reduced anxiety, and 66.7% show increased quality of life following their study participation. Life is hard, and however rough we have it, there's always someone worse off than us. I don't know about you, but relying on a pill every day doesn't sound like a way that I would want to live my life. Wouldn't it be great if psychedelic therapy could help make life easier for people like my friend Sarah and others who suffer from depression and anxiety? Thank you. That was my expository speech.